Hey folks, Matt from artoftheimage.com. I was just reading through the comments on the recent video I did on a question from a viewer about whether to buy a Canon 60 Mark II or a Nikon D750. One of the most interesting ones, a commenter wrote in and said that he didn't know why anybody would buy a Canon camera because all of the top-ranked cameras are Nikons. And I had to chuckle because this always brings up the age-old debate, or it gets people riled up on both sides. You know, DxO Mark is just a tool, but it does give us a base test that's an equal test of where the sensors perform. Some people don't agree with it, but it is one of many methods we can use to evaluate sensor performance. The viewer in question here was, let's see, the comment is from Tom, and he wrote in, DxO Mark, all top ranks are held by Nikon cameras. Why would anyone even buy Canon? Seems Canon being a global leader is a lie. Now, this got me interested because I've seen this before for years now. If you look at the DxO top-ranked sensors, Nikon does dominate. So I was just curious to see where we are at today. As of today, today is what, September 27th, I think it is. Yes, Wednesday, September 27th is when we're filming this one. We have the DxO Mark rankings here for best performance in sensors. And we have the top 10, and we have 6 of them held by Nikon. We've got in second place the Nikon D810, down in fifth place the Nikon D800E, then we've got the D800, then we got the D600, the D610, and the D750. So 6 out of 10 of the top 10 sensors, the best performing sensors, the best performing cameras, are indeed held by Nikon. 60% of the top 10. We've got 3 from Sony. Number 1 is the Sony A7R II. In third position is the Sony RX1R. I think that's a Mark II, if I'm reading that correctly. And then we have the Sony A7R. So the A7R Mark I and Mark II are both in the top 10. And then the last position, we have the Pentax K1. So this is interesting because he kind of has a point. There are no Canons ranking in the top 10 of DxO Mark sensor evaluations, camera evaluations. This is really interesting because actually if you keep going down, then further down we've got another Sony, another Sony, another Sony, and then a Phase 1. So I didn't even look to see where Canon is showing up, but in the top 10 or 15 we don't have a Canon. Definitely in the top 10. Top 14 I've got right here in front of me, no Canon. So it's interesting because it wasn't that long ago that Canon was the best in sensors. And then we had that little turn in history when around the time of the D700, the Nikon D3, and the D300 came out. And all of a sudden, Canon was behind Nikon. And since then, they've never been able to reclaim the top spots in performance for their sensors and their cameras. And even against Sony. Sony and Nikon dominate here with a good showing by the Pentax K1. So no Canons. What do you guys think about that? Does it matter to you? Do you still like the overall performance of the Canon? I mean, Canon's done. I think the reason, as Tom indicated, that Canon tends to be a #1 bestseller is I think they're very good at marketing. And I think in North America, specifically in the United States, they have very good market share, and they've done a very good job of marketing that and still holding their top-selling positions from when they did make the best sensors. Still very good cameras, but here we see not even placing in the top 10 against basically Nikon and Sony. What do you guys think? Let me know in the comments below. How does this fit in with your view of cameras and what are the best performing? Are you surprised about this? Do you care? Let me know. Let's flesh it out a bit and discuss it a bit. It's interesting data. Again, it's just another means of measurement. It's just a tool. Doesn't mean you shouldn't buy Canon. Doesn't mean you should buy Nikon or Sony. But again, just more information and to be an empowered consumer, an empowered shooter. Let me know what you guys think. Looking forward to hearing your feedback on this one. Continuing on with some further comments, some further feedback from 12 different photogs have weighed in here. I think we had 12. Let me just double check. We had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. I think I pared it down. So 9 photogs, photographers weighing in on the video I did of the 6D2 versus the D750 when we had one of our viewers asking which one they should buy. So we have some very interesting additional feedback, some points made from some of you folks, some good ones, and I always appreciate that. Lord Aereo, I hope I'm saying that right, YouTube user. I personally would get a 5D Mark III because I know what it's capable of, and it's still an amazing camera if you're a decent photographer. And I own a bunch of Canon lenses. But yeah, you can start a business even with an iPhone. The big DSLR doesn't make you automatically a better photographer. Couple good points here. 5D3 is still a very good camera. If you are already bought into one of the systems, which I don't think you said you were, but if, for instance, you were, that might make you decide to go with the Canon over the Nikon or vice versa if you own a lot of one brand of lenses, because it's going to be additional cost to sell. And then also, big DSLR doesn't make you a better photographer. Yes and no. Definitely a good photographer can use just about anything, but good tools can make a pro even better, or good even better. Actual art photography. I will recommend the Nikon D750 for a few reasons. First, it's got 2 SD card slots. A professional always must back up his work while shooting, and only the D750 can do that, as the 62 has only 1 SD card. The D750 also has better low-light performance and has better dynamic range. So some good points here. For a lot of people, the 2 card slots is a big thing, as Eshel Art is saying. He believes professionals should do that. I shot cameras without dual slots for years. I like having them. Doesn't bother me to shoot a camera that doesn't, but it is an advantage. The 750 has better low light performance and better dynamic range. 2 very good points. In other words, it's a better performing camera than the 6D2. So, if you want the edge in the performance, again, 750 is the way to go. Rupam writes in, I really love the Canon's button layouts and operability. Somehow I find it more refined compared to Nikon. The DPAF is of its own league. Nikon struggles a lot there. But the Canon really plays a marketing gimmick here. They put a substandard sensor in the 6D Mark II. Well, the DR of it is just unacceptable to me for the price. Dynamic range. Why didn't they just slap on the 5D4 sensor on it? Canon is seriously compartmentalizing their lineups and intentionally putting deal breakers. Lack of 2 card slots, 4K, and a decent sensor is just not acceptable. I really love Canon and want them to perform well, but they're just screwing their customers. It's time we should say no to Canon and move on to other brands. Enough is enough. So Rupam feels we're not getting enough value for the money, and I would argue that's probably a good point. The 62, I think it definitely should have had 4K. Dual card slots, I could live without, would have been nice. And the sensor, I think, is still good, but could have been better. But 4K was the deal breaker for me, but I feel his pain. I hear what he's saying. Can't get enough. I thought I wanted the D750 for so long. Then I went into a Sammy's camera and held one, and I really didn't like the grip that much. The D610 was lighter and more comfortable for me, but I want the features of the D750, but I want all the features of the D750, so I might still get it. Good points, and I often say this, and if I don't, I should try and say it every time. In the end, get out there, get the cameras in your hand before you make the final decision, or at least buy them from somewhere you could exchange if you don't like it, because in the end, everything could look good on paper, and you just may not like the fit and finish and the feel of it in your hands, or how it performs once you're using it. So try it out. Good point. Gadgets 24/7. Because photography is your main aim, I think you should look at the Nikon D610 if budget is an issue, because it is cheaper than any other full-frame camera in India. But if you don't mind spending the 20K extra on the D750, get that. It is worth it. Canon's current pricing is a little too high for what it offers. And I would agree. The D610 is a great option. I don't know if I brought that up in the previous video, but I love the D610. You can go back and see my reviews on it. It's a wonderful camera. Could be, I've always said it, I think it's the best value in a full-frame DSLR, and I think it still is. Very, very good performance. Not so much for video, but certainly for photography. I really like that camera. And I do agree. I think Canon's price is 62 a little high for it being a little lackluster on features. Luke McGregor says, a photographer who wants to do some video should go Nikon for the better ISO performance and better dynamic range and better lenses. A videographer who wants to do some photography should go Canon for the dual pixel autofocus in video mode. That's how I understand the difference between Canon and Nikon. And that's actually a very good summary from Luke here. Thank you, Luke. That's what I always say, but he's put it in very succinct wording here. If you're shooting primarily video, then I tend to like the Canons, except in the positions where Nikon now has 4K. If you tend to be a photographer shooting some video, then I tend to like the Nikons because they perform better. They have better ISO performance, better dynamic range, and I do agree with them. I like the lenses better, although Canon does have some very nice lenses, and that's more of a Ford Chevy thing. It's just I like the Nikon ones. Untouchable 360X says, none, get a Fuji X-T2. So I'm just throwing that in there. Little tongue-in-cheek, but great option. Fuji X-T2 is a very nice camera, and you might want to look at that, or the X-T20. Lumixter says, I would personally get the D7200, which is interesting because his call sign is Lumixter G, so you would think he's shooting Lumix, Panasonic. But the 7200, again, very capable option if you wanted to go with a crop sensor. We were talking about 2 full frame bodies, so that wouldn't have come up in my options. But again, I like the Nikon D7200. Very good performing camera. Thanks, folks, for your feedback. Some really good points here. Again, I'll put links below to any of the stuff that's mentioned in here and some really good feedback from you guys. Always appreciate that. Our question today comes in from Ajif. I hope I'm saying that right. It says, is it a good idea to upgrade from the Nikon D7000 to the Nikon D7200? My immediate reaction would be absolutely. The 7000 was, 16 megapixels if memory's serving. I shot a pair of them for a couple of years doing weddings. Very capable camera, great autofocus system, very nice camera. 7200, though, has a brand new sensor, 24 megapixels. This is a big jump, 8 megapixels. Even better autofocus system. I think it got a bump in the autofocus system if memory's serving. I think it had the flagship at the time. Better buffer depth, lots of things are just better on the 7200. I mean, the 2 biggies are the autofocus and the sensor. But yeah, I think it's a decent upgrade. If I was you, though, I might seriously look at maybe the 7500, depending on if you want to do a lot of video. If you're not doing video, 72 by all means, great upgrade. If you don't need the faster buffer depth, maybe the 7100 is a great option for you without spending the extra money. The 7500 I throw in there because it's a great deal if you want 4K video. If you shoot video, then you're getting 4K, so you're getting current standards for video. You're going to find it really fun to extract 8 megapixel stills out of 4K video. That's pretty cool. It gives you a lot of other options. The other thing is that is a very good performing sensor for low light. Actually, it's probably Nikon's best at the moment, period, for APS-C, for a crop sensor, the DX. It's the D500 sensor in a less expensive body, so you may want to consider that if video is an option or you're shooting a lot of low light. So, yeah, I think I would definitely agree with that. Or, as I said, the 7500 or even the 71 is an option if you don't need the buffer depth, you're not shooting fast frame rates. What do you guys think? Do you agree with me? Should he upgrade from the 7000 and the 72? What do you think about the 75 and the 71, as I mentioned? Let me know your thoughts. Which way would you go? Let's help out at JIF. And thanks for your question. Stay tuned. We'll be back soon here at artoftheimage.com.